Hi. So I've done just a few tweaks to the Spark setup, and just to show you what I ended up with. It's pretty much the same. I just reduced the amount of points. I think in the pop network I reduced the constant birth rate to something like 1,000. Yeah, 1,000 there, and a bit more variance in the life. That's pretty much it. So pretty basic, nothing too fancy, and we'll render this out and see if it looks good enough in the comp. So let's quickly set up something for the smoke as well. And as I was saying before, we can try and use the same source. So here I have our source points, then we have a point replicate. We're cleaning up our geometry here, and we're adding a noise to the velocity. So we'll take that, and this can be our smoke source. But the one thing is, I need to now use that group we made. So I made a group just for the ground impact points before merging them in with the shield impact points so that we could delete them out later. And here I need to remove those. So we just want to keep the shield ones. I want to add smoke to the shield, but not have any smoke on the ground impacts. So delete ground hits is not working. So let me just check my group in here. So 2-point groups, ground hits. I think I'm removing the points from the original set of impacts and not after the point replicate. So what I need to do is I need to transfer that group ground hits to the replicated points as well. So I'll put down a group transfer here. So when you replicate, you can inherit the attributes from the original point, but it doesn't apply any groups into that whole bucket of points. So just to confirm that that's what's happening, you can see in here the original point is being removed, but I want all those points to be removed, so I need to transfer that group to the replicated points. So let's switch all this off and just say point groups, ground hits. And I'm not sure how this distance threshold works, but I guess if we look at the scale of this replicate, so it should be within 0.1. Still not working. Overwrite. So that worked. So let's just see if we definitely still have points on the shield. Yeah. So we'll use that for now. And what I'm going to do is actually copy over my DOP for this volume here. So we already have something that works there. I'll just use that as a base and we can tweak it from this point here. So we have our point cloud as our source. We have a noise on velocity, which I've already got. So I'm gonna just add some noise to P. Just messing around with some settings here to see if I can get a little bit of breakup. So just break it up a little bit, double check our velocities. That looks fine to me. And then we have our pyro source here, which should now be set to our new .NET. And we have velocity, density, temperature, and fuel we don't need. And then we're rasterizing those. So let me just do a quick check. So it seems to be mostly working. Let's just see if we can get a strong direction of that source. So I want quite an extreme reaction when those projectiles hit the shield, and I'll probably even end up putting in a transform of the source, and this is how I do my fake wind setup. So let me just double check our settings here. So there's definitely some volume there. It's just a bit low res, I think. And then obviously, because we want a very high velocity in the sim, you need to kind of go higher on the substeps as well. So you can see I'm getting quite a lot of break up there. So basically now I'm just trying to find at least a decent starting point for this, because I've just duplicated this setup from another volume, the sim that we did before. So I just want a good thick source. And then we do have this noise as well. That's the position noise. That's fine. And then our velocity is working fine. We've got density. So I think what I'll probably need to do is add another turbulence to break this up a little bit and maybe increase the let's have a look at these shape settings here. The disturbance can go pretty high on that. It's a fast moving effect, so the volume we're just going to see appear and disappear quite quickly, so we can go pretty crazy on these turbulences. And if we take a look at this one, just let this cook here. So I'm going to reduce the scale of that. We go very high swirl size, maybe just enough scale to have some small effect, and then I'm going to make a smaller one here. And this one I will go smaller and stronger. Let's use density. So that's using density as a control field. So where it's denser, it should be stronger. So I want that moment that the impact happens, it can be very turbulent. And let's take off of my bigger one, I'll take off a control field. So that's just a general movement. And as before, I'm going pretty high with my values there, just so that I can see that they're doing something and then I can tweak them down. So those are pretty crazy. So we're getting some decent break up there. We don't have too many smooth plumes, which is good. Looks like the turbulences are possibly a little bit too strong still. And then let me try this fake wind. So, oh, and we need to get a collision in there as well. So let me actually grab the shield and merge it in here just for visualizing. So the velocity of the source is definitely doing the job, but I really want this smoke to be flying over. So let's just first set up a collision object. So we'll take the shield and what do we need to do? I think let's add our fake wind here. So I'll put in a transform. And all I need is for the collision object and the volume source to be moving constantly in one direction. So in this case, I want the smoke to end up moving in this direction, so on negative Z. So I need my source and my collision to move constantly on positive Z. So let's put $F times 0.2. Might be too fast. Let's keep it like that for now, and then do a reference copy. I'll put that in my source. Make sure this is pointing to transform 2. So now our source moves on positive Z and our collision object moves on positive Z as well. Let's actually put down a trail here and recompute velocity for the collision. And jump back in here. Okay, there we go. So now if I use deforming, we should get a moving collision object. And the only problem now is I'm not seeing any smoke. So it's probably because it's falling without my resize field. So the gas resize here. So I'm going to track, here we go. So I'll set that to track transform 2 as well. And so at this point, because everything in the DOP is actually just constantly moving on positive Z, it becomes sort of difficult to judge whether or not the sim's working once you're inside the DOP. So I usually come outside the DOP, do a counter transformation, and then just pin the viewport there. So let me just reduce the resolution here a bit more. And then over here, put down a reference copy and invert. So delete channels. So now everything will be moving back to where it's supposed to be, but the smoke will be flying much faster in this direction. And the reason I like to do a fake wind like this is because you maintain all of the details that you get from the turbulence and the sim, because essentially it's like you have your source that's moving through space, if you follow my mouse, and it's still, the smoke is still reacting in a good way in the DOP, and then you just move it all back to where it's supposed to be, and the smoke still has all the interesting shapes. Whereas if you use one of the wind forces inside the DOP, it tends to stretch those details or even override some of the turbulence in general. So if you look at that, we're getting a very exaggerated motion from the volume, but it's still maintaining all of that detail. So that's something similar what I'm going for here as in the X-Men reference I had up before. If you want to see that, it'll be in the opening video to this effect. And again, that extreme motion from the smoke, so nothing is stopping it, it's always going to move from here over there, is makes it feel just a lot more powerful. So something like that is what I'm after. So I just need to see, is this collision working? It does seem to be working fine. And then we can merge on our sparks as well. So maybe that wind is a bit too strong, or the turbulence is a little bit too much, so I'll probably tweak that down. But it's useful to do a much higher resolution sim before really deciding how much things need to change. Yeah, I think that makes it feel really powerful. As though the gunfire coming in is extremely strong, and it's just breaking against that shield and whipping over the edge. So I think my turbulence and maybe my input velocity is slightly over the top, and I could maybe rely more on that fake wind. So let me just try that quickly. And then we just need to set up a basic shader for the sparks and a basic volume shader for the smoke here, and do a light. So let's see, I wanted to just reduce this turbulence a bit. have a little bit less velocity. Could maybe half this fake wind. So now that we've pretty much done the simulation part, I'll clean this up and write it out so we can start in the next one with just setting up the shaders and making sure that the sparks actually light up the character and the environment as well, because as the sparks are hitting the ground, we want little bright flashes of light. And even when they hit the shield, obviously we do have the shield emitting light on the character, but we'll just have a simple light setup for all of the sparks. And what's nice is we should get some good lighting inside of that smoke as well. So that'll be the next video, shaders and lights, render that all out, and then just pretty much jumping back into comp and bringing the whole shot together. So that feels a little bit more tame. I'll probably myself try some options between whether or not the input velocity feels better with less of the fake wind, or whether I need less velocity and more of the fake wind. At the moment I'm feeling like I needed a little bit less fake wind, but I shouldn't have dropped my velocity down on the source. I think the turbulence is probably fine, but I just need a little bit more velocity, and then we're good. So I'll see you guys in the next video.